Hi, I'm Jane Love. I would like you to know a little bit about my life. I was born in Kilberry, Argyllshire, Scotland in 1825. My parents were Dugald McKinnon and Jane MacPhail. I married my husband, Robert Wright Baxter, in Scotland. He was born in Donaghadee, Ireland in 1820, the first son of John Baxter and Margaret Wright. I met my husband while I was watching the children of my deceased sister at my brother-in-law, Archibald MacPhail. He was a shoemaker. Immigrated to Design in 1855 with our large family. We first heard the gospel preached in Scotland and were converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints about 1847 and were one of the first converts in Scotland. We emigrated to Zion in 1855 with our large family, crossing the ocean and then arriving in Zion in 1855. We later settled in Wellsville, Utah. We were blessed with 9 children. Robert Love Baxter Jr., who married Mary Ellen Barnes. Archibald MacPhail Baxter, Jane Baxter, who married Francis Gunnell, Willard Snow Baxter, who married Lydia Hopkins, Stephen Baxter, who married Ella Wolfe, Jerusha Baxter, who married Peter Mangan, Lillian Baxter, who married Henry Ames, Margaret Baxter, who married William Mon Jr., and last John Love Baxter, who married Susan Brown. My husband Robert Wright Baxter had first married Isabel Gray, and later also married my cousin Jane McKinnon and later Marion McIntosh Stewart. I was bedridden for 14 years but never complained. We had many grandchildren, including our oldest son Robert Baxter Jr., John Barnes Baxter, who married Norma Olson in 1922 and had 5 sons, Alvin, Darwin, Robert, Bean, and Garth. I passed away in 1893 firm in the faith. I hope all me descendants would also remain faithful. Please go to FamilySearch.org for many more photos and stories about my life. You can also find this story on YouTube by searching for Robert Wright Baxter. Life sketch of Jane Love Baxter, written by a granddaughter, Verna M. Sorensen. Jane Love Baxter was born December 11, 1825, at Greenock, Scotland. She was the daughter of Dougal Love, who was born about 1800 in Kilmarnock, Scotland, and of Jane MacPhail, born 1800. Her brother and sisters were John, Kate, Agnes, and Elizabeth Love. Her mother died in Ontario, Canada. She had lived in Greenock all her early life. She attended school for a few months each winter. Her sister Elizabeth Love married Archibald MacPhail. Elizabeth died in 1845, LDS records show May 28, 1847, about the same time Robert Baxter's first wife, Isabella Gray Baxter, and their baby girl died. Elizabeth Love MacPhail left 2 small children, so Jane went to live at the home of Mr. MacPhail and to care for her sister's children. Robert Baxter was boarding at Archibald MacPhail's house when Jane came to care for the children. She became acquainted with Robert Baxter, her future husband. She heard the gospel preached by the Mormon elders and she knew it to be true as soon as she heard it. She was baptized July 17, 1847, by Elder Malcolm McCallum, in Greenock, Renfrewshire, Scotland. On February 1, 1848, LDS records show March 12, 1848, Jane Love married Robert Baxter. Elder Duncan Campbell, president of Greenock branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, performed the ceremony. They continued to live with Archibald MacPhail and Jane cared for the children. On November 2, 1848, their first son, Robert Baxter, was born. In the spring of 1849, both Jane Love Baxter and her husband contracted typhoid fever. There were very few hospitals and only the very rich could be cared for in them. There were infirmaries in the country where people were taken and they either survived or perished. In this case, both Robert and Jane Love Baxter survived. They were in the infirmary for more than 2 months. A nurse cared for their 6-month-old son, Robert. On June 18, 1850, a second son, Archibald MacPhail Baxter, was born. He was later killed while hauling freight down the Ogden Canyon in August 27, 1873. Trade in the shoemaking business was dull, so she and her husband moved to Port Glasgow. On October 11, 1851, a daughter Jane was born. She was blessed by Apostle John Taylor. Later she became Jane B. Gunnell. On November 9, 1853, their 4th child was born. He was named Willard Snow Baxter. At that time Willard Snow was laboring in the Glasgow Conference. The saints were shunned and persecuted. Robert Baxter's parents refused to see him. Jane's parents were not very pleased with her, So she and her husband hoped and prayed for the day to come when they could take their little family across the ocean and live in Zion, Utah.